You already sense that something has shifted. You can feel it deep within that quiet space you retreated to when they broke you open and walked away as though you were nothing at all. Something genuinely has changed, not necessarily in you, although you certainly have transformed too. Something has changed in them instead. And somewhere beneath the exhaustion, beneath the grief, beneath years spent questioning your own sanity and wondering how someone who claimed to love you could treat you like a disposable object, somewhere underneath all of that, a part of you has been quietly waiting for this exact moment, not out of bitterness, not out of any desire for revenge, but out of something older, deeper, and far more certain than either of those feelings. You have been waiting because you always knew the truth deep down. You always knew who they really were beneath the surface. And now, finally, the universe is catching up to that truth. It is no coincidence that you find yourself here right now. The person watching or reading this has survived something that most people cannot even begin to comprehend from the outside looking in. You were not simply lied to. You were systematically dismantled piece by piece. You were made to question your own memories, your emotions, your worth, even your basic perception of reality itself. You handed someone your trust, your vulnerability, the sacred interior part of who you truly are, and they used it as ammunition against you. They turned your love into leverage. They turned your wounds into weapons. And once there was nothing left for them to extract from you, they discarded you as though you had never mattered at all. And then, and this is the part that cuts the absolute deepest, they simply moved on with their life. They smiled. They charmed new people effortlessly. They told a brand new story where they played the victim and you were cast as the villain. And you sat alone in the wreckage they left behind, wondering how someone capable of that level of cruelty could appear so completely untouched by any of it. But here is something you need to understand before we go any further together. Untouched is not the same thing as unaffected. Smiling is not the same thing as being healed. Moving on is not the same thing as being genuinely free. And the universe does not send its invoices according to any schedule that humans can track with their wounded, grieving eyes. If any of this is landing somewhere real inside you right now, if you feel that particular ache of recognition stirring, then you are exactly where you are meant to be in this moment. Now let's talk about what is actually happening beneath the surface. There exists a law that operates quietly underneath every single human interaction. It does not care about charm. It does not bend for charisma. It cannot be manipulated with clever words or seduced through a convincing performance. It is older than any court system ever created, older than any religion, older than the very concept of justice itself. And it is extraordinarily patient. It has been working silently since long before you even knew to look for it. It has been quietly building its case, cataloging every wound inflicted, every lie spoken, every soul diminished purely for sport. And at a certain point, a point that can never be predicted, forced, or rushed along, it begins delivering its verdict. The narcissist who betrayed you is not exempt from this particular law. No matter how invincible they appeared to be, no matter how easily they seemed to glide through life while you were busy rebuilding yourself from scattered pieces, no matter how many new people fell for their charm, or how convincingly they played the role of the innocent party, this law simply does not care about their performance. It only cares about what is genuinely real. And what is real has been steadily accumulating inside them for far longer than you probably realize. Here is the first sign to watch for, and I want you to pay close attention, because it rarely announces itself loudly. They are gradually losing their ability to maintain the mask they've worn for so long. You have to understand what a narcissist's life actually looks like beneath the surface they carefully project outward. It is not the confident, effortless existence it appears to be from the outside looking in. It is an exhausting, relentless, all-consuming performance instead. Every single day, the narcissist wakes up and must construct a version of themselves to present to the world, a version designed to cover up the hollow, terrified, deeply fragmented reality lying underneath. They have been doing this since childhood, honestly. They built that mask so early in life and wore it so consistently that most of them genuinely cannot tell anymore where the performance actually ends and the real person begins. But that mask carries a cost, and that cost compounds over time with brutal, unforgiving arithmetic. Every relationship they destroy leaves a lasting scar on the mask itself. Every person who eventually sees through them, every friend who quietly disappears from their life, every partner who finally walks away for good, every colleague who slowly stops trusting them, each departure creates another crack, not a wound they actually process or grieve through in any healthy way, but a genuine crack in the structural integrity of the false self they depend on entirely for survival. And here's the thing about cracks like that. They inevitably spread over time. When karma begins to move against them, You will start noticing that the narcissist's performance begins faltering in ways that simply cannot be hidden anymore. The stories they tell start contradicting each other. Their charm starts feeling strained rather than effortless and natural. The mask slips in public settings, a flash of rage where patience should exist instead, a coldness where warmth should be present, a cruelty that leaks through at moments that cannot be explained away or covered up with a convenient smile. People who once defended them start growing quiet instead. Allies begin drifting away slowly. The entire social architecture they spent years carefully constructing begins developing visible fractures throughout. You might not witness this directly with your own eyes. You might hear about it secondhand through someone who knows someone connected to them. You might notice it in the strange desperation of a late-night message that arrives completely without warning after months of total silence. You might sense it in the way they suddenly need to be visible constantly, posting compulsively, performing publicly, overclaiming and over-explaining in ways that feel less like genuine confidence and more like outright panic. Confidence does not require an audience at midnight. Confidence does not need to constantly remind people how well it's supposedly doing. What you're actually witnessing when you see that kind of behavior is not strength at all. It is the beginning of structural collapse instead. And here's the psychological truth that most people completely miss. The narcissist never actually processes the people they harm along the way. They do not grieve relationships the way you naturally do. Instead, they warehouse them somewhere. They archive them in a part of their psyche they've spent their entire lives refusing to examine honestly. But warehouses have weight limits eventually. And after enough betrayals, enough destroyed connections, enough discarded human beings stacked on top of one another, the floor inevitably starts giving way beneath them. The past starts leaking through. And the narcissist who once moved through the world with such apparent ease begins feeling hunted by a version of themselves they simply cannot outrun anymore. No matter how quickly they move, how many new people they charm, or how confidently they smile for the cameras, they are steadily losing the mask, and the world is beginning to see clearly what was hiding underneath it all along. Let that truth settle for a moment. Now for the second sign, and this one is quieter, more internal, more devastating in its own particular way. They are slowly becoming a prisoner of the very emptiness they always carried but could never actually feel until now. One of the most disorienting realizations that comes with recovering from narcissistic abuse is the moment you finally understand that the person who destroyed you was never actually capable of the genuine connection you believed you were building together. The love bombing, the intimacy, those moments that felt so real and rare and precious to you, none of it was actually what you believed it to be at the time. It was a simulation instead, a masterful and devastating simulation. Because the narcissist, beneath all their bravado, cruelty, and performance, is fundamentally and profoundly empty inside. Not metaphorically empty, but structurally empty at their very core. There exists a void where authentic self-awareness, genuine empathy, and real emotional connection are supposed to naturally reside, and there is simply nothing there instead. Just a cold, echoing hollowness that they've spent their entire existence desperately trying to fill from external sources. And for a long stretch of time, they actually could fill it, at least temporarily. New sources of admiration, new validation, new people willing to reflect back the image of themselves they desperately needed in order to survive psychologically. The cycle of idealizing, devaluing, and discarding kept moving forward steadily, and the underlying emptiness remained somewhat manageable. Painful, yes, but manageable nonetheless. But karma simply does not allow this particular cycle to continue indefinitely. At a certain point, the supply eventually dries up. Not all at once dramatically, but gradually instead. Much like a water table drops slowly during a prolonged drought, imperceptibly at first, and then suddenly reaching a critical point. The people who once provided that admiration start seeing through the performance clearly. The new relationships they attempt to form become increasingly difficult to maintain because the mask keeps cracking, because word travels between people, because something in how they engage with others has grown desperate rather than genuinely magnetic. And as that supply steadily decreases, the emptiness, that foundational, primordial emptiness that was always present within them, begins expanding rapidly. This is precisely when the narcissist begins encountering themselves for what feels like the first time, and it is not a gentle meeting by any means. Because without the constant noise of fresh supply, without new people to charm, conquer, and eventually discard, without the intoxicating rush of power and control to drown everything else out, silence finally arrives. And within that silence, they begin feeling what they've spent decades running from desperately. Not necessarily guilt exactly, since their capacity for genuine guilt remains quite limited, but something closely adjacent to it, something uglier and more unsettling, a formless dread, an awareness of their own fundamental wrongness that they simply cannot metabolize, explain away, or project onto someone else. They start experiencing the emotional consequences of a life spent treating other people as mere objects. Not through any genuine moral reckoning, but through a growing, suffocating sense of isolation that follows them into every room, every relationship, every carefully constructed performance they attempt. You need to understand what this actually feels like from the inside looking out, to be surrounded by people constantly, yet feel utterly alone regardless, to have someone right beside you and feel absolutely nothing in return. No warmth, no genuine connection, no relief whatsoever from that internal cold. And those thoughts, without the usual distraction of fresh supply, without the intoxication of control over others, begin turning dark, circular, and increasingly inescapable over time. They replay old moments repeatedly, not out of any genuine remorse, but out of a compulsive, disturbed need to rewrite the narrative in their favor. They revisit old wounds, though not the ones they personally caused others, but rather the ones they themselves received, whether real or entirely imagined. Because blaming others remains the only psychological mechanism they've ever really developed throughout their life. The emptiness keeps expanding. The prison keeps tightening around them. And the narcissist who once made you feel like absolutely nothing begins experiencing, in their own deeply distorted way, what nothing genuinely feels like for the first time. You survived that same emptiness when they projected it onto you repeatedly. They are only just beginning to survive it themselves now. And unlike you, they possess no real emotional tools whatsoever with which to actually process it properly. Can you feel that truth settling in? That is not cruelty on anyone's part. That is not revenge either. That is simply the universe maintaining its own careful arithmetic. Stay here with me a bit longer, because this third sign is one that most people never really discuss openly. It operates so far beneath the surface that only those who have genuinely studied the psychology of this particular personality type can see it clearly. But once you see it for what it truly is, you cannot unsee it afterward. They are haunted by you in their own way, not in the way that love typically haunts someone with warmth, but in a way that genuinely frightens them instead. I know this sounds fairly counterintuitive at first. The narcissist discarded you completely. They moved on without any apparent remorse whatsoever. They replaced you, quite possibly within just days of your separation. They told a story in which you were framed as the actual problem. They acted as though you had never mattered to them at all. And meanwhile, here you are, still healing, still working diligently through the wreckage left behind, still having difficult days where grief rises up unexpectedly and surprises you with its sharpness. So how could they possibly be haunted by you under these circumstances because you did something that almost no one else in their entire life ever manages to do? You genuinely saw them, not the mask they wear constantly, but them in the true intimacy of your relationship together. During those rare moments of vulnerability that even narcissists cannot entirely prevent from happening, you witnessed something real beneath their carefully constructed performance, and you remember it clearly to this day. And somewhere deep within the architecture of their psychology, they know full well that you remember it. That particular knowledge does not produce genuine shame in them the way it might in a psychologically healthy person, but it produces something else instead, something they are constitutionally incapable of tolerating well: the sense of being truly known by someone. The sense of being genuinely, undeniably seen by a person whose perception they could never fully control or manipulate. This is precisely why narcissists often return to people they've discarded, not out of genuine love, and not even out of longing in any meaningful emotional sense, but because the person who saw behind their mask holds a particular kind of power over them that literally no one else possesses. You represent unfinished business to them, not because your connection was ever real to them in the same way it was genuinely real to you, but because you remain present in their psychological landscape as an unanswered question, a witness they cannot fully discredit no matter how hard they try, a mirror they manage to shatter but somehow could not fully destroy. And when karma finally begins moving in on them, when the mask is visibly cracking and the supply is steadily drying up and the emptiness keeps expanding rapidly, they begin thinking about the people they've discarded along the way, not with love exactly, but with a desperate, searching quality they would never openly name and barely even understand themselves. They scroll through old messages late at night. They drive past old familiar places cases, they ask mutual contacts seemingly casual questions that are not casual at all beneath the surface. They watch your life unfold from a distance, and what they observe disturbs them in a way they cannot process cleanly or comfortably, because you are doing something they convince themselves you could never accomplish without them in your life. You are rebuilding steadily. You are healing genuinely. You are becoming, slowly and with enormous courage, more fully yourself than you even were before they first arrived in your life. And that quiet, ongoing becoming of yours is far more devastating to them than anything you could ever deliberately do in an act of revenge, because the narcissist structured your entire relationship around one specific belief, that you needed them desperately, that without their validation, their presence, their approval, you were somehow less of a person. That particular belief was their true source of control over you. It formed the entire architecture of their power within the relationship. And watching you live well now, watching you grow steadily, watching you reclaim your voice, your dignity, and your genuine sense of self, it systematically dismantles that belief right down to its foundation. It retroactively exposes the lie they told themselves about who you really were, what you actually needed, and what they truly meant to you all along. They are haunted by the mounting evidence of your survival, and their haunting remains directly proportional to how fully and courageously you choose to keep living your life. This is precisely why your healing matters so much beyond just yourself personally. It is genuinely cosmic in scope. Your recovery is not simply good for you individually. It is the very instrument through which the universe delivers its most pointed and precise response to everything that was done to you. Every single time you choose yourself over the grief they left behind in their wake, every time you refuse to shrink back into the diminished person their cruelty tried desperately to create, every time you speak your own truth honestly, trust your instincts fully, and extend yourself courageously toward something new, good, and genuinely real, you are not simply healing yourself. You are participating in something considerably larger than yourself. You are part of the larger reckoning taking place. The narcissist who betrayed you is not actually living the triumphant, unbothered life they desperately wanted you to believe they were living all along. They are managing a slow, internal erosion instead, one that remains completely invisible to the casual outside observer, but entirely unmistakable to anyone who genuinely knows what signs to look for. The mask keeps cracking steadily. The emptiness keeps expanding relentlessly. The haunting keeps deepening over time, and these three elements combined together create a psychological pressure that no amount of fresh supply, no new performance, and no new victim can ever fully relieve for them, because the true source of that pressure remains entirely internal. It is the accumulated weight of an entire life lived without genuine connection, without authentic emotion, without real accountability, without fundamental truth at its core. And that particular weight does not decrease over time. It compounds instead. It grows denser and heavier. It becomes increasingly harder to carry around without it eventually showing through the cracks. You need to understand something important about the nature of karma in the specific context of people like this. It does not always arrive as some dramatic external catastrophe, though occasionally it certainly does manifest that way. It does not always look like public exposure or some dramatic consequence, though those particular things happen too on occasion. More often, more consistently, and more precisely, karma arrives instead as an internal condition, as a life that appears perfectly fine from the outside looking in but feels like a slow, ongoing suffocation from the inside, as the persistent inability to experience the warmth, depth, and meaning that other people simply take for granted in their daily lives. As the slow dawning realization, impossible to fully articulate even to themselves, that every single relationship they've ever had was fundamentally transactional in nature, and every transaction eventually ended in loss for them. And every loss has made them progressively more alone in a way that no new relationship can ever fully repair or fix. That is the true sentence. That is the actual judgment the universe ultimately delivers to those who make a consistent practice of destroying other people. Not fire and brimstone exactly, not necessarily public ruin either, though that possibility may certainly come to eventually, but rather a life experienced permanently from behind glass. A life where the richness, warmth, and depth of genuine human connection remains permanently just out of reach, fully visible yet completely untouchable to them. Because the very same behaviors that once gave them a sense of power are the exact same behaviors that ensure they can never be truly, safely loved by anyone. You were never weak for loving them the way you did. You were never foolish for trusting them fully. You were never naive for seeing something genuinely real in them, even if that real thing happened to be buried so deeply beneath layers of damage that it could never actually become what you truly needed it to be. You were simply someone who had the courage and audacity to show up fully within a relationship with a person who was constitutionally incapable of ever meeting you there in return. That is not a personal failure on your part whatsoever. That is a tragedy instead, their tragedy specifically, not yours to carry. And that particular distinction matters enormously because you genuinely can heal from this. You already are healing, in fact. The simple fact that you are here right now, actively seeking understanding, seeking the right language, seeking a framework that makes sense of everything that happened to you, that is not weakness on your part at all. That is the very first movement of someone who fully intends to become free, truly and completely free. Not simply free from them as a person, but free from the diminished version of yourself that they actively tried to create within you. Free from the constant self-doubt. Free from the exhausting hypervigilance, free from that compulsive need to fully understand why someone could ever treat another human being the way they treated you throughout your relationship. You are actively moving toward genuine freedom right now, and you deserve to move toward it fully, with your whole self engaged in the process. The narcissist who betrayed you is not actually moving forward in any meaningful sense. They are moving in circles instead, faster circles perhaps. Louder ones certainly, more desperate ones over time, but circles nonetheless regardless. While you, with every single day of honest, imperfect, courageous healing work, are moving steadily in a direction they can no longer follow you into, away from the orbit they once pulled you into, out toward genuinely open sky ahead. There exists a specific, unmistakable moment within the recovery process from narcissistic abuse where the grief finally transforms into something entirely different. Not into hatred, because hatred still represents a form of connection to them. Not into pure indifference either, because indifference actually requires ongoing suppression to maintain. But into something cleaner instead. Something that feels remarkably like standing on solid ground again after a long stretch of not knowing which direction was truly up anymore. The moment where you think about everything they did to you, and instead of feeling pain, you feel genuine clarity instead. Instead of longing, you feel authentic relief. Instead of that desperate need to make them finally understand the impact of what they did, you feel a quiet, profound recognition that your own understanding has always been enough on its own, that their acknowledgement was genuinely never what you actually needed from them in the first place, that the person who truly needed to see the full truth was always yourself. That particular moment is coming for you if it has not already arrived, and when it finally does arrive, it will not come with any dramatic announcement whatsoever. It will arrive quietly instead. Right in the middle of an entirely ordinary day, within a breath that simply feels different from all the ones that came before it, in a thought that passes gently through you without hooking in, without pulling at you, without bleeding into everything else. And in that particular moment, you will finally understand at a cellular level what took so painfully long to understand intellectually, that you were never actually the problem in this situation. You were never too much or too little, never too broken or too needy. You were simply a whole, complete person who happened to encounter someone with a void where their own wholeness should have naturally existed. And that void tried desperately to consume you entirely, and you survived it. You genuinely survived. Let that truth land fully within you now. Let it reach all the way down into those places inside you that were once told you would not survive this, that were told you were nothing of value, that were told the entire world would confirm every terrible thing they tried to make you believe about yourself. Those particular places deserve to hear this truth clearly stated. You survived everything, and not merely survived either. You are here now, fully awake, actively seeking truth, refusing to let the false story they told about you become the final version of your life. That is not simply survival, that is something considerably more meaningful. That is genuine reclamation taking place. And while you continue reclaiming your life, while you breathe more deeply and sleep better each night, while you remember who you truly were before they ever arrived and simultaneously discover who you are steadily becoming afterward, the narcissist who betrayed you is sitting within a life that grows progressively smaller, colder, and more confined with every single passing day. The signs are all there. clearly visible to anyone who genuinely understands what they actually mean. The mask keeps cracking steadily, the emptiness keeps expanding relentlessly, the haunting keeps deepening over time. Karma is never delayed despite how it might feel sometimes. Karma is never distracted from its purpose. Karma cannot be bought off with charm, performance, or even the most convincing smile imaginable. It is simply patient instead, extraordinarily and implacably patient in its approach. And it has been quietly doing its necessary work all along, in the darkness, in the silence, in the spaces between their carefully constructed performances, just as quietly and just as certainly as you yourself have been doing your own important work throughout this journey. Keep going forward, keep healing steadily, keep becoming who you truly are meant to be. The universe has never once lost track of what was done to you.